Not too long ago, Dr. Chip, who I've known for a while, asked me if I could speak. He let me know he'd be away, and I definitely jumped on the chance. I'm excited to be here. I've been thinking about this and preparing for a while. I want to give a special thanks to family and friends who came to support me. I have not stood in front of a group of people for a while, and the encouragement is it's really appreciated. This building itself is kind of special to me because when I was actually younger, I attended the St. Jean d'Arc School, which was associated with this church. Ta-da! So there's little me before my hair dropped from my head down to my face. And I would spend times here, of course, getting to worship and learn about God. And I was also a Cub Scout here in the back hall where we did pine derbies and different kind of powwows and fun things like that. And even now, I drive by this building every day on my way to work and drive my kids to school. And they've been asking me day after day, when are we going to go? When are we going to go there? And they love this place. And I'm here with my wonderful wife of 16 years, Jess, right there. Not the bearded one, the one next to her. There she is, curly hair. And I'm also here with my kids. And my kids they're sort of funny creatures. They're always active. I mean, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And they're lots of fun. We have so much fun together. And they're also really creative. And Juliana in particular, my 12-year-old, who's right here doing the slides for me, she's a really creative one. God just made her, she just makes things. And so a while ago, she actually made this box. I mean, she didn't make it. I guess a plastics company made the box. But what she did was she put together a bunch of little questions that we could ask ourselves as we sit around the family table. And the first question that came out of this box after she had made it was, this is the actual paper, if you were stranded on an island with only one person, who would that person be? Now, you have to realize that I'm sort of like the really fun parent. I'm the one that plays with the kids all the time. I make them delicious food. I mean, we do so much together. So when this question came out, who would you want to be stranded with on an island? The answer to me was very obvious. Of course, Dad, because he's just, Dad. And so I was kind of excited about this to have my moment of glory. And so the first person to answer was my Bella. She's 7 years old, and I thought, we have that special connection, me and Bella, so I just couldn't wait for her to answer. And so I leaned in, and she said, I'd bring my friend Paris, because she has really long hair, and we could use it to survive. I'm not sure what that means at all, and if Paris would actually go along with that, but that was her answer. But that's okay, because I got 2 more kids. I'm 0 for 1, but I got 2 more kids who can hopefully pick me. And so next is Rylan. And Rylan is, how do I say this? 5.5. And he says sort of weird 5.5 things that only a 5.5-year-old would say. So as we go to him, he's got the biggest smile in the world, and he says, who would I bring? Hairy Monster. I don't know what that means. I still haven't figured it out, but he had a good laugh, and we laughed with him. But I lost to Hairy Monster. And so then finally there's Anna. My dear Anna. You have to realize that we have just been buddies. I mean, we've gone rope climbing together. We've gone hiking together. I make her such delicious food. I mean, if I was stranded on an island, I'd probably pick her. Would she pick me? Now's the time to find out. So as I looked at her, almost a tear in my eye, what did she say? My babysitter, Devin. Her favorite babysitter, Devin. And I'm going to be honest, Devin is a pretty remarkable young woman. I can't blame her. But sometimes it kind of stinks not being chosen, right? I sort of had that being in 4th grade recess and not getting picked first to play football. But we're going to look in a little while about this idea of being chosen. And we're going to look at a guy who was actually chosen to be the first king ever of Israel. But before we get into that, I want to point out this story is not just about a historical figure, but this is really a story about you and me. Because, truth be told, you and I are chosen. God's word tells us clearly that God created us for a reason. In fact, God rescued us and made us his children with a purpose and purposes. And so, like I said, we'll look at this first king of Israel, a guy named Saul. And so, like anyone else, sometimes he was a really great example. He had good days, but he also had some really bad days, and he was a bad example. But I think we can learn from both, right? Well, so we're going to start off and see about this idea of starting strong on whatever opportunity that comes our way. And so a little backstory is the people of Israel have been demanding a king because they've looked at the nations around them and said, how come they get one? Which is something every child says, right? But the nation said, how come they get a king? We want a king. We want to be like them. And of course, you and I know it's never good to start off in life and make major decisions based upon jealousy and envying, but that's what they wanted. They wanted a king to bring them into battle. They wanted a king that could sort of be their figurehead. And so that's what they asked for. And God warned them through the prophet Samuel, this is not really a great idea, but they persisted. And God did this sort of, I think, remarkable thing. God said, okay, I'll give you what you want. Even though it's not the best, I'm going to give you what you want. And it's great that God gives us that opportunity sometimes to exercise our will, to see the consequences, good or bad. And so then we meet this young, good-looking, tall, hardworking young man named Saul. And Saul actually hasn't hit his moment of glory yet. He's actually out looking for donkeys. His dad's donkeys have been missing, and so he and a servant have gone out to try to find them. And so they're searching high and low and searching on and on until finally his servant says, this is not working. I have an idea. Why don't we go find a prophet of God, a man with wisdom, and see if he can seek out help from God? Saul says, I think that's a great idea. So that's what they do. And so when they finally find the prophet Samuel says, okay, I've got two pieces of news for you. The first is the donkeys are found. Don't worry about it. The second piece of news is, oh, and you're also going to be the first king of Israel. It's kind of a big deal that he's chosen to be king. And to me, that sounds like kind of a good day. I don't know about you, but maybe your good day is different than mine. So for a minute, think about it so we can kind of get into Saul's shoes. What makes a good day for you? Think about that. For example, I know it's going to be a good day when, and if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can mention to someone next to you what makes a good day to you. Just take a quick moment while I get some water. Can I get my water? I think it's there. Or I'll take Anna's water. That was a good throw, bad catch. All right, so, and if I'm answering, I would say, oh, thanks, I owe you a sip of water. I took a sip of yours. And for me, I know it's going to be a good day when the sun is shining. I love waking up and seeing the sun shining. Clouds, not so much, but this is still going to be a good day. So now we kind of know a little bit maybe how Saul feels, and maybe you've never been offered the presidency or the kingship of a country, but we've all been given opportunities, and they're very important opportunities. Maybe a job offer's come your way or an opening to volunteer somewhere. Maybe you've had a chance to have a child or adopt a child, or you've joined a team or a group. And of course, coming to know God or feeling that he's leading you in some way. These are all really important opportunities that we have. So how do you feel when an opportunity comes your way? See, it's funny. Different people have different sort of ways they approach this. And some people are exhilarated by it. Just, oh, I can't wait. What can I, absolutely, let's do this. And some people are more like calculating, like, how will I do this first? And which step should I go? And what's going to happen if I do this and that? And that's sort of more the way I do things. And then maybe some people are optimistic, like, this is going to be awesome. This is just going to, have you known people like that? Just like, let's do this. This is just awesome. It could only turn out good. And then some people, I think, maybe are gripped by fear at something new. Not too long ago, I actually met a man who was gripped by fear at an opportunity. I turned 40 last year, and Jess took me to a ziplining course where you kind of go up a mountain and then on a ski lift, and then you actually zip line down. You clip into this line, and you go zooming down the mountain, which is just awesome. I was really excited about it. Not everyone in our group was excited about it. So we were with some people, most of them we had never met before. And so Jess and I kind of clipped and zipped down, and we were waiting on this lower platform. In fact, there's Jess right there, zipping down, and we were kind of waiting for everyone else to come down, and people kind of zzz, come down, and all of a sudden there's no zzz for a while. And I look up, and sure enough, on the hill, there's a man standing on the edge of it like this, and he's zipped in. He's got his helmet on, he's clipped, and he's just kind of doing this. You can picture it. And the instructor and his girlfriend's like, just do it. Just take a step, right? Just take a step. And he's just kind of frozen there. And finally I hear his little voice come out and say, I'm trying to, but my body won't let me. He's telling his body, take a step, and he was absolutely frozen by fear. Now, the good news is he eventually did it. I don't know if his girlfriend pushed him or what, but he eventually got going, and we got to move along. And so Saul felt a little bit of fear, of course, along the way. In fact, when it was the day for his big coronation, the day that he came in front of the nation, he actually went and hid. Like, he actually hide-and-seek style hid. They had to go find him. He was hiding behind some barrels or something. So, of course, there can be mixed emotions in an opportunity. But look at what he said after Samuel told him he'd be king. In 1 Samuel 9, verse 21, Saul answered, "But am I not a Benjamite from the smallest nation of Israel? And is not my clan the least of these clans? Why would you say such a thing?" In other words, I'm not really an important guy. You might have the wrong person. I think this is important because I don't think that's not a very 2017 response. I think a 2017 response would be more like posting on Facebook, status, awesome, because I'm awesome. Or maybe sending out a tweet saying, finally, they realized who I am. Or maybe even getting a big old button saying, I am the greatest, by the way. And we hear these things in media and sports and politics and other places. And so we see Saul with a very different attitude. And sure, is confidence good? Yes, we need confidence to do things in life. But humility is essential for starting strong. And this whole thing of humility should not be confused with insecurity. Humility just simply says, do you know what? It's not about that I'm great enough to do this job, but it's about this job as a great responsibility. I can tell you, after I accepted the invitation to speak here, I felt that sort of just overwhelming humility or just the overwhelming weight of it all, I'll say. Just that, wow, I'm glad that someone thought I was qualified to stand in front of people and share some ideas. And I sure hope I'm up to it, because this could impact people for good or for bad. And I'm sure you felt that way at times too. And so many great leaders have throughout history said, it's not about me and how great I am, it's about the people who I'm impacting. And I think as parents we do that, as volunteers we do that, as people who are elevated in a workplace and promoted, we'd be best to say, how can I impact these people? Not how glad we are that our name's on a door or that we get a gold sticker, but the opportunity that we have. And so remember that when you're meeting a new person, not what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. Or when you have a chance to give money or resources. It's not about the giving and the feeling good as much as how we can impact these people. Or maybe starting a project at home or work or school. Well, Samuel further tells him during this conversation that the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you and you will be changed into a different person. And this sort of idea, I mean, my mind plays with this. So I think about, was it like the Incredible Hulk? That all of a sudden he just bursts out and he's this giant guy ready for anything. Or Tony Stark, he all of a sudden gets this power suit and he becomes Iron Man. Not exactly, it wasn't quite that dramatic, but we know that his friends and people who knew him well said, there's something different about Saul. Have you noticed? There's something drastically and dramatically different. And I know absolutely part of that is the power of God just changed him. And also something happens when we choose to push beyond our limits, when we choose to push beyond our fears and do something that we didn't think we could do. I myself experienced this when I was in my early 20s. I'd gone with a bunch of friends to do some rock diving, to jump off high rocks into water. And when I say I went along to do it, I actually went along to watch. I had no intention of doing it. I thought they were crazy to do it. There was big signs on the rocks that says no trespassing, no jumping, and that was the jump-off point, as it was. And so I just kind of watched for a while, and after a while I decided, I'm going to climb up on that rock and see what it looks like. And so I'm standing on this rock, looking down, realizing, wow, it's a lot higher when you're standing, looking down at this water. And so I was all well and good until I kind of went to step back and realized there was a younger girl behind me, just a young girl. And she kind of looked up and said, are you going to jump? Now, something happens to a guy when a little girl basically comes up and says, are you going to do this? Because if not, I will. And at that point, my decisions became really simple. And I remember stepping off that edge. And two feelings I can still remember clearly. One is I would have given anything in the world to be back on that rock as I was floating through anything. You can live a lifetime in a moment, and I thought that. And the second was when I finally hit that water and came up and breathed, I realized that fear that had been shaping me in some way, it no longer held me so tightly. And maybe the same thing's happened to you before when you've taken advantage of an opportunity. That it kind of changes you, doesn't it? It leaves you just a little bit different. Another chance I had in my life was an opportunity to go on a missions trip. And I remember when my mentality went from, why me? Why should I go? To, why not me? Why wouldn't I? And I've had a chance to go to a couple of different places. Most recently, I got to go to to Africa to teach some kids in the Mathare Valley slums with an organization called Mission of Hope. And these kids are the poorest of the poorest. And before we left, they gave each one of us a giraffe, or they call it a twiga. And as they gave it, they smiled and danced and sang, thank you, we love you, we love you. And even now, every time I look at this guy, it reminds me that I was changed. This homebody who didn't want anything to do with even going on an airplane. My first flight was at age 25, and that was fine with me. And when I pushed back those boundaries and took advantage of the opportunity, it honestly changed me. And so Saul also realizes that, along with his humility, that he needs to depend on God. In fact, he had gone, this whole story began because he went to Samuel to seek Samuel's help, to seek God's help through Samuel. And we'd be so wise to remember the basics of Christianity, which is taking time every day to pray to God, to remember that, you know what, I'm actually not the center of the universe, but God, you are, and let me sacrifice a few moments to you in prayer. Or reading the Bible, because Jesus said, man doesn't live by bread alone, so we don't just live by food or energy drinks or our cell phones and our jobs and our promotions and people affirming us. We don't just live by these things, and while they're good, Jesus was clear, it's God's words that give true life. So anyways, a short time later, we can all agree Saul was off to a great start. He's doing things right. Things are turning out well. And now he has this galvanizing moment. He actually goes into battle, and he rescues these people from a place called Jabesh Gilead. And while he's there, he rallies the entire nation behind him. He routs the enemy. He is just, it doesn't get any better than this. And so he's off to a great start, but there's a saying in investment that past results do not guarantee future performance in a stock. And the same is true of a life or an opportunity. Just because we start off well doesn't mean we should relax or start to coast. In fact, we have to stay strong and stay sharp. And so next, let's look at staying strong. So it's 1 Samuel 13. And we're going to kind of get to see maybe some mistakes that Saul makes and what we can learn from them. We're not going to judge him, though, right, guys? We're going to learn from his mistakes. So Saul and his son each have a group of soldiers that they're beginning to lead, to getting ready to do battle with this group called the Philistines. That's been a problem for them for a long time. And the problem is that Saul and his son are greatly outnumbered, and they're greatly outgunned, so to speak. They didn't have guns, but you know what I mean. They have more chariots. So it's a bit of a problem. Now, the only thing is that throughout the history of these people of God, they've been underdogs a lot. They're like the original Disney story. They're the underdogs who keep winning over and over again. And so, unfortunately, Saul kind of forgets this for a moment. Samuel tells him, I am going to go away for 7 days, and your job, Saul, is an important one. It's to do nothing, to wait, right? Which is sometimes the toughest job, right? He tells him, while I'm gone, you wait for me. And when I get back in 7 days, I'm going to offer a sacrifice to God. I'm going to ask him for his wisdom and his help. Okay, Saul? Saul, do you get that? Okay, so remember, how many days, Saul? 7 days. That's right, Saul. And who's going to do the sacrifice, Saul? You are, Samuel. Yes, that's good. You got to pass this quiz. So let's see how this works out. And so, but let me ask you a question first of all. How do you feel about waiting? Like in worship, we talked about waiting. And how do you feel about it? Probably not very good about it. How do you feel if I tell you that an MIT professor did a quick study and calculation and realized that you and I will spend 2 years of our life waiting in lines? That's every second, minute, day, month for 2 years. That's how much time we spend waiting. Now, how do you feel about waiting? Even worse, right? There was this kind of cool article that came out in the New York Times a number of years back where a Houston airport was facing a problem dealing with waiting. People would get off their planes and then go pick up their bags. And they'd go normally to the nearest carousel, pick up their bags. And the problem was people were waiting for a very long time, and they were getting upset about it, and they were logging complaints. And so the executives at this airport had a great idea that they would put more baggage handlers in the mix so things would happen quicker. And things actually did happen quicker, that eventually people only had to wait for 8 minutes, which was right at the industry average. So it was really good. But people kept complaining. So then they came up with this kind of creative idea. They said, what we'll do now is people will arrive on this plane, and they'll come in through this gate, and rather than have the luggage right here, so they'll have to wait. Instead, we're going to put the luggage all the way down here as far as we can, 6 times further away. Now, you're probably thinking what I thought, oh, those people are going to be so mad. They'll even be madder now. No, well, no. Would you believe that when the people had to then walk much further, but when they showed up and found their baggage, complaints dropped to almost 0? That's how much we hate waiting, right? We would rather walk after a long, awful traveling day and disgusting food and all this. We'd rather walk and walk and walk and walk. And we can be content with that. But standing and doing nothing? No way, that's too tough, right? And I think part of the reason is because waiting reminds us that we are not in control. Whether it's that slow person who's in the lane counting their change to buy their food, or that car that's broken down on the side of the highway so everyone has to slow down and see, oh, a broken down car, wow, I've never seen that before, backing up for a mile. It teaches us that, and it reminds us that we actually can't make those problems disappear just by wishing they'd disappear. So yeah, waiting's tough. And in fact, Saul had to deal with this on his own. And I picture day one, like piece of cake. It's day one. He's waiting for Samuel to come. And mind you, as the enemy's growing around him. And day 2, my soldiers are getting kind of upset. They're starting to scatter. Day 3, the pacing begins. Back and forth. He's wearing a hole in the ground there. And day 4, he starts talking to himself, because that's what we start to do when we know we're really in trouble. And maybe I should just do this sacrifice myself. Okay, and so after this day 5, he decides, I'm just going to do it. No, I can't do it. No, I'm just going to do it. No, I can't. Day 6, he's in full-blown panic. He's looking for the flamethrower and some animal to set on fire. It's just not good. And then finally, day 7 comes, and I imagine he has had his timer set on his iPhone or whatever the ancient equivalent was, and says, this day 7, where is Samuel? Let's get the sacrifice, let's get this victory. But something happened. He had waited these 7 days, and would he stay strong and show patience? Let's see. In 1 Samuel 13, verse 7, Saul remained at Gilgal with all his troops, and they were quaking with fear. He had waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. See, something happens when we begin to feel stressed. Does anyone here really act a lot better when they're stressed and make much wiser decisions when they're stressed? Probably not. Most of us, when the stress level goes up, most of us start making worse decisions almost every time. And in Saul's stress was reshaping his perspective. And perspective is a funny thing. You've probably heard that saying that a person's perspective shapes their reality, or perception is their reality. And I think there's some truth to that sometimes. Now, let me quick time out here. I like to climb things. I'll climb a rope. I've always climbed trees. I used to climb up on the roof of my house and just kind of sit there. I know, weird little thing. I've been to rock climbing gyms. And one particular day, I found a really, really great kind of rock wall to climb. So I started climbing this thing, and I was just kind of, just stretching out, getting ready for this thing. And I'm just climbing hand over hand and getting near the top. I feel like I can reach the clouds. And when I did, I just kind of, okay, well, maybe it wasn't, I might have been exaggerating a little bit. But it's funny how perspective can change things so much, isn't it? And in the same way, but I did climb it, though, so that counts for something, doesn't it? Perspective, in fact, does matter. Sometimes we realize that what we thought was a mountain was really just an anthill. It wasn't really a big deal. Most of the things we worry about, I'm told, don't actually ever happen. And I found that in my experience. So sometimes we think it's a mountain, but it's an anthill. But if I'm being honest, sometimes we realize that mountain, oh yeah, that's a mountain. It's a big, ugly mountain in our lives. It's a big obstacle. It's a big problem. And it would do us well to keep the perspective and remember that, yeah, it's a mountain, but God made that mountain. He led us to that mountain. He'll walk with us every single step, up and then back down that mountain. I think God's also given us a secret weapon. In Colossians, we're told, set your mind on things above and not earthly things. And I think that's really important to keep our perspective right. I recently bought myself a pair of virtual reality goggles, and my wife is going to be ashamed of me once I put these on. So this is kind of a cool thing. If you've never tried one, you can actually clip a phone and you can play some different games on it. And so you throw these things on. And so right now, for example, I could be walking through a maze, and the way the game is played, my kids play this all the time, is you actually walk like this, and when it's time to turn, you have to turn your body, and you walk like this, and just turn this way, and that's the way you play the game. You're actually in this virtual reality. Now, the problem happens is sometimes my kids forget that it's virtual reality, not real reality, and so they'll actually walk forward and trip over things and fall over things and bump into things, and it's actually even more entertaining that way. So if you ever get one, let the kids try it. But it's sort of a reminder that when we keep our eyes focused on this virtual reality, on these imaginary problems, these false perceptions, it's easy to stumble and it's easy to fall. Instead, if we use eyes of faith, and faith is the willingness to say, I don't really see this or feel this, but I'm willing to say this is true. This might be true. This other reality might be true. And sometimes it's a matter of choosing hope when a situation doesn't really steer you towards hope. I think about people that we see in the news and the media, and maybe people we even know, people who seem to have everything. They have the resources they need, they have the physical ability and health and good relationships, but they can just be miserable. They can live as if they're paupers. But I've also seen in my travels, especially around the world, kids who have nothing, kids who have one shirt that's tattered, people who have just no food in their stomachs. Some of them, many don't have families because they've been ravaged by disease. And they walk around with smiles like kings. It's a matter of choosing to have hope and choosing to have the proper perspective. Well, Saul's trying to learn this. And he says to his followers, bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul said something like, I did the sacrifice thingy. Okay, Saul, who was supposed to do the sacrifice thingy? You were, Samuel. And how long were you supposed to wait for me? 7 days, Samuel. But, see, Samuel now has to give him some bad news that will affect many generations even after him. That God chose you and wanted to use you and wanted to use your family for generation after generation. But instead, because you've shown that your agenda is more important than God's agenda, you lose the job. That your future generations will not be able to carry on. In fact, God had to do something that maybe you've had to do before. To a child or an employee, you've had to say no. Sometimes we have to say that difficult no. Sorry, Anna, I know I'm going out of order. But I listened to a speaker named Tim Urban. He does this really fantastic little talk called Inside the Mind of a Procrastinator. Any procrastinators out there? Kind of put things off a little bit? Too ashamed to admit it? Okay. Well, sure. Some of us like to put things off, or we just can't help but put things off. One thing he said is that, in general, the mind of a procrastinator will gear their mind towards thinking about what is immediately easy and fun. And he kind of contrasts and says, now, if you happen to be a dog, in your entire life, you only do what's easy and what's fun, you're actually a huge success. I mean, that's a pretty good life. But for people, on the other hand, we sometimes have to say no to certain things. Whether you're trying to pass a big exam and you have to say no to distractions, or you're trying to get fit and it means saying no to maybe certain foods or certain habits, or maybe you want to save up some money for something or give to someone in need, and it means sometimes saying no to unnecessary purchases. A while ago, I had an opportunity right here in Lowell at the Tsongas Arena to do a race called the Urban Challenge, the City Challenge. And to prepare for this, I had to really, and this was a challenge that did obstacle courses like over walls and carrying things, and it was a pretty cold, rainy day. But I had to really take time to prepare for that. There were a lot of things I had to say no to. I had to say no to a lot of bowls of ice cream, a lot of sitting on the couch late. I would have never been able to say yes to these obstacles that I could do them if I hadn't said no to many things beforehand. Sometimes a difficult no leads to a very happy yes. So just a real quick thing on Saul, too, is that he constantly said yes to his impulses. You know, I think we see in today's political climate, like I said, sports world, entertainment, we have too many people who find it easy to say yes to whatever impulse. And I think we might even be teaching a generation that you're not in control of your impulses. You just have to simply do what you feel rather than exercise self-control. Well, in Saul's life, we see he constantly does what he feels like doing instead of saying no and exercises self-control. And he, over and over again, causes emotional pain to those around him. He causes relational pain to those around him. So when we saw Saul, he started off so strong, and now we see him 15 years later. We see that there's been battles around the nation. We see there's been battles inside of him. And now we see God giving Saul another chance. I just want to say that like really slowly and clearly. God giving Saul another chance. Sometimes in life, we don't feel like we get another chance. Sometimes we don't give people another chance. But we see the Lord setting an example, saying, Saul, even though you've done these things, let me give you another chance. So Samuel comes up, and it's almost really similar to the previous conversation. Samuel comes up and says, in 1 Samuel 15, verse 1, so Samuel is saying this, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. You know, it's almost like this funny dialogue. He's talking to him like he's younger. Like, hi, Saul. Hi. It's me, Samuel. Remember me? I'm the one who God used to tell you that you'd be king. Yeah, hi, Samuel. I remember you. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and it's kind of important, so I want you to put on your best listening ears. All right, I'm listening. Now, you're going to go do battle with the Amalekites. Okay, battle with the Amalekites. Got it. Okay, and when you defeat them, you need to destroy everything. No stealing their plunder, no taking it with you. Okay, check. Destroy everything. Yep, got it. Don't take anything with me. Any questions, Saul? Nope, I got it. You sure, Saul? Because it seems like it. Nope, I got it. No problem at all. And so he heads away, and I'm sure Samuel walked away wondering, did he finally get this one? If you're a parent or work with children, you probably feel that way sometime. They said they got it, but they don't seem like they got it. Let's see how this turns out. You know, sometimes staying strong is as simple as just doing what's expected. Just not being a Superman, but just simply doing what's expected. Whether you're doing work in construction, whether you're performing a procedure, whether you're doing a homework assignment or living out the Christian faith. Sometimes it's just as simple as you know, it's kind of funny because I found that movies geared towards children over time seem more and more to have this theme of just kind of follow your heart. Just kind of do what you kind of feel like doing. But in reality, that's not really the path to success. I think most of us who are older and experienced would kind of call that going rogue, you know, kind of just doing your own thing. I'm just going to do whatever I want. But the reality is what your boss and your teammate, your coworkers, the people around you, what they really want to know is, can they depend on you? If you say you'll be somewhere, will you be there? If you say you'll do something, will you do it? Is your word good? And so now we're wondering the same thing about Saul. Will he do these things? And so this battle is fought, and the great news is, just like Samuel said, they won. And now Saul has a decision to make. And this is, of course, a pivotal moment in his life. He's being given a second chance. He's found out the penalties of doing things wrong, and we hope that he'll learn. On one hand, though, we have his soldiers who say, I'm sure, saying, we want the plunder, we want the plunder, we want this stuff to become more rich. And I'm sure Saul realizes that if he takes some of this stuff, he, in fact, will build his kingdom and his name, and it'll be a great benefit. And he's earned it in a sense, right? Because he fought the battle. You know, making a decision, I think the best illustration I can think of for making a decision like this is a squirrel. Okay, so to stick with me for a minute. So how often have you been driving down the road, and as you come, you see a squirrel in front of you, right? And you know, squirrels what do? We all know what they do, right? We see a squirrel walking across as you're driving up, and the squirrel looks at you for a minute and tries to make it. But then it says, wait a minute, no, I don't think I'm going to make it. And it tries to go back this way, right? It says, no, I got this. Then he tries to do it again. And he kind of zigs and zags back and forth, right? Until finally it disappears underneath the hood of the car. And I'm shocked at how often there's nothing squished in the road behind me. But it's that indecisive going back and forth type thing. And in fact, a couple weeks ago, as I was driving down the road, I saw a little chipmunk actually run out in the road and do the same kind of move. And by the time I drove by, it was a much smaller chipmunk, unfortunately. Sorry. But sometimes that shows us the effect of being indecisive when the plans and what we're supposed to do is so simple. This waffling back and forth doesn't really benefit us. So let's see what Saul does. But Saul and the army spared Agag the king, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. And when Samuel reached him, Saul said to him, the Lord bless you. I've carried out the Lord's instructions. Well, okay, let's say this. Let's say someone breaks into your house, and they steal like 10 things, but they leave everything else alone. They just steal 10 things. They leave you thousands of things. Are they still a thief? How do you feel about that? Yeah, sure. Saul might have actually obeyed in most things, but he obeyed in things he wanted to. He disregarded things he didn't, and that's, of course, not a key to success. And poor Samuel. Because Samuel has been staying strong, actually. He's done what's expected. He's displayed self-control. He's shown patience. And now Saul's telling him, hey, good news, I did everything you said. And so I can just picture Samuel just saying, oh, because I could have sworn I heard some sheep as I was coming in. Do you know anything about that? Sheep? And I think right now I can hear some cattle right now. I think I hear them. It's coming from that direction. Cattle? And finally Saul knows that he's caught. And he says, oh, right. This is kind of a funny story, Sam. I think you're going to like this one. You'll get a kick out of it. See, I told the soldiers to destroy everything, no plunder. But they all of a sudden took all the best sheep and the best cattle. And what am I to do? So I decided to be a real champ here, and we're going to sacrifice that to the Lord now that I'm caught. All right? And on this goes. And Samuel finally says, enough. Because Saul has chosen to pass on blame and to deflect responsibility rather than taking responsibility. And listen, we've all been there, so no judgment on Saul, right? It's important we do the right thing when we said a careless word and it's gotten back to someone, or when we've dropped the ball at work on a task around the house or somewhere else, and there's some fallout, and people are wondering who's to blame, and we kind of want to just hide. Or maybe when you've made a little mistake like Saul, and you just want to call it like an oops, when it's really a sin that needs forgiveness. Sometimes the words, I'm sorry, are the most important thing to start that healing. But Saul wouldn't take responsibility. And so Samuel replies to him, does the Lord delight in burnt offering and sacrifices as much as obeying? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. But because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. See, Saul began with so much potential. What an opportunity to affect millions and millions of lives for generations to come, to pass on this heritage for his children, to find blessing for himself and the entire nation. Sorry, I wrote a really messy, scribbly note. Just trying to see what it says. Okay. And so I encourage you to read the story. There's so many things to learn. And of course, David and Goliath, the exciting story of David and Goliath kind of intersects this. I encourage you to read in 1 Samuel if you get a chance. There's so many life lessons to be learned. But in the end, it's a sad ending for Saul. I'm not going to give away the ending so you can read the story on your own. But you see, this is not the ending for you and for me as far as this lesson. Because you see, many, many, many years later, another king would come. And he'd also have a humble start. In fact, he wasn't born in a castle, he was born in a stable. And this king would embody all the attributes of a great leader and a great king. He would serve others, he would lead those who would follow, and he would love them just as they are. Quick pause on that. A while ago, I was putting my 5.5-year-old Rylan to bed. And like I said to you, 5.5-year-olds just say weird things sometimes. And so this particular, he said things like, my friend went to the moon on a golden rocket. And no matter how hard I try to tell him otherwise, he will not listen because his friend apparently is much smarter than me. Or another one is, I wish I could eat a flower and shoot fireballs. And I should tell you that Rylan is in the middle of his Super Mario Brothers phase, and we can't wait till he gets out of it. Everything's Super Mario Brothers. But this particular night, as I'm putting him to bed, he said, Dad, I know how much we cost. And my first thought was, what did his sisters tell him? Did they tell him that we got him in the red tag section of Walmart, the clearance? What did they tell him? But I said, okay, how much do we cost? And he said, Jesus. No, I'm not always the smartest guy, I have to admit, but I'm trying to learn at my age. Sometimes it's time just to be quiet and to listen, even if the knowledge is coming from a 5.5-year-old. I said, Jesus, huh? What do you mean? He said, yeah, because God loved us so much that he sent Jesus on the cross. I I said, that's right, buddy. That's exactly how much we cost. In this King Jesus, God's beloved Son, don't forget, was sent by God the Father, where he served and he led and he loved. And even so, he was rejected, not because of his disobedience, but because of ours. And the world that he loved nailed him to a cross. And he willingly allowed it, taking my place and your place, because while our sins enslaved us, his blood freed us on the cross. Because that's exactly what you're worth to him. Before I give a couple closing thoughts, I want to see an example of a father who is really passing it on right. Did I miss that one? I am missing a page. Did I miss something? Pass it on. So one of the most important things we do is we pass it on. And I want to show a quick video of a dad who I think is passing it on really well. I saw this and I loved it, so I wanted to show it to you guys.
Say, I am strong.
I am strong.
Say, I am smart.
I am smart.
Say, I work hard.
I work hard.
I am beautiful.
I am beautiful.
I am respectful.
I am faithful.
Yeah. Say, I'm not better than anyone.
I'm not better than anyone.
Nobody's better than me.
No one's better than me.
I am amazing.
I am amazing.
I am great.
I am great.
What's your name?
Aaliyah Austin.
If you fall,
I get back up.
what are you?
I'm blessed.
Yes. Say thank you, God,
Thank you, God,
for making me
for making me
the greatest.
the greatest.
There's nobody
There's nobody
better
better
than me.
than me.
All right, give me 5. Give me a kiss.
I love that. I've watched that several times. Talk about passing it on, huh? Well, Jesus came to pass on the great news that you are chosen, we are chosen, that we are valuable to God. And he invites us to come join us in the daily opportunity to join him in this thing that we call life. And not long after Jesus had died and rose from the grave and went back to heaven, there was another man who coincidentally, whose name was also Saul. And this man named Saul was on a really destructive path. He was hurting himself and many other people around him. But you could say he saw the light in Acts chapter 9 if you want to look it up. He quite literally saw the light and had an encounter with the resurrected Jesus. And Jesus changed him. Like was said earlier during worship, God changes people. And especially people who don't know they need changing, like Saul. He thought he was just was perfect. And this Saul met Jesus and was renamed Paul, actually, because God changed his identity. And he became the great apostle Paul that we know about and that wrote a lot of the New Testament. And Saul, who became Paul, he really got this thing about passing it on. In fact, he had many people in his life that he would pass on this good news about Jesus wanting to share our lives with us and his offer of forgiveness. And towards the end of his life, because Paul had lived day in and day out passing on this message, and he was soon going to die for this decision, this commitment. And he communicated with a young man named Timothy. Timothy is somebody who he passed on the message to and mentored and cared for deeply. And as he neared the end of his life, he wrote one of his final letters to Timothy, the letter of a man who knows that his life is almost over, that he's about to step into the great beyond. And he said these words to him, and I think they're words for you and for me to grab hold of when we're faced with difficulties and opportunities, to remember that it's for something. He said to Timothy and to you and I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. And now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but to all of those who have longed for his appearing. Just pass it on.